Hello there, we are the Dolphin Group, and this is our presentation about the role of religion in Baltimore's gun violence conflict. For this assignment, we used the social cube framework to analyze the conflict within Baltimore. The social cube analytical framework examines the intricate patterns of a conflict through a simultaneously multidimensional method to highlight prominent interdependent issues that are enabling the conflict. This framework examines six interrelated facets that include history, politics, economics, demographics, religion, and psychocultural factors of a conflict. However, we will specifically focus on how the religion facet affects the conflict. What does the religion facet examine? The religion facet of the social cube framework helps identify the influential connections to the conflict. The three main components found in the religious facet of Baltimore's conflict includes power imbalance, positive factors, negative factors. How religion impacts the power imbalance in Baltimore. Baltimore has faced several problems within their community and their relationship with the government due to the abuse of power from the law enforcement. There is an imbalance of power within the city since law enforcement does not face prosecution for their abuse of power. A blatant example was the major conflict resulting from the incident of Freddie Gray's death. Religious groups became influencers in this conflict since they flooded the streets with protests to demand justice from the government. These protests were effective because of the moral voice that religious leaders provided for the community, which resulted in the prosecution of the officials. Positive factors of religion in Baltimore's conflict. Baltimore's religious groups have helped make improvements within their community by fostering and promoting reconciliation, community building, providing social services to target core grievances affecting poor households, assistance for single-headed households, targeting at-risk youth, mentoring as well as support to individuals affected by poverty and street violence. Religious groups have recognized their crucial role and responsibility that follows in having the trust of their community. On many occasions, individuals have chosen to seek help from religious leaders as opposed to law enforcement when dealing with crimes. As a result, religious leaders have become key players in mediation and peace building within the community. Negative factors of religion in Baltimore's conflict. People have been recognizing the negative influence bad churches are having on Baltimore's conflict. As Daphne Austin, co-founder Mothers of Murdered Sons and Daughters United mentions, poverty went to their guns. Homelessness, bad parents, bad schools, bad communities, bad church, everything went into those guns. Some of the negative factors from religion include religion can be isolationist and promote divisions as opposed to unity. Churches that want to stay neutral within the conflict thus becoming bystanders. Religious leaders' indifference to the issue. While people understand that there are other aspects to the problem that is enabling the conflict to continue, they know that bad churches that act as bystanders to the conflict are not taking responsibility to improve the lives of their community members. The analysis helped identify Baltimore's religious groups having a high influence in shifting power to achieve justice. Churches can help build and guide communities towards a positive way of living. Some people have bad perception of churches because they are not contributing to the solution. Churches that are bystanders are also enabling the conflict to continue. Religious leaders are able to shift groups into action, whether it be advocacy, outreach, social services, donations, or hate, prejudice, collective resentment against others, and intolerance. Religion itself does not lead to intractable conflicts, neither do the factors of the social cubism. but rather the way in which these environmental factors interact with one another. In the case of Baltimore, religion is highly influential in directing a community already affected by other factors of the social cubism framework.
This week,
We
faith
will be
leaders
closing
continued
with the
appealing for
following
calm in the
video
wake of the
where Bishop
Baltimore
Eugene
riots that
Sutton
were triggered
explains
by the
how
death of
religious
Freddie
leaders are
Gray.
coming
He was a
together to make a
25-year-old black
positive
man who
impact
died
on
after
Baltimore's
suffering a
communities.
spinal injury while in police custody. The riots resulted in extensive property damage and more than 250 arrests. Clergy were among those leading peaceful demonstrations against police violence in Baltimore and several other cities. The National Council of Churches said, quote, African American men and women are dying at the hands of the police, and the nation must correct this injustice immediately. Eugene Sutton is the Episcopal Bishop of the Diocese of Maryland. Bishop, welcome back here.
Thank you, Bob.
What were the most important messages that came out of this violence?
Well, I think one of the most important messages is that eventually justice has to be done in order for there to be peace. This past week in Baltimore has been very difficult for us. On Monday, the city exploded in many of its parts, and on Monday evening, many of its neighborhoods were burning and looting was happening. On Tuesday morning, we wept, as we did Monday night. We wept, we grieved over the loss. But then we picked ourselves up.
But it was almost as if everybody had kind of decided, gangs and
yes.
church leaders and everybody said, oh, wait a minute.
It took many parts of very many communities to make peace in Baltimore. You mentioned the gang leaders, the Bloods and the Crips, had a historic agreement to say they would not be fighting each other this week, and they were going to help quell the violence. Religious leaders from all over the city, Christian, mainly Muslim and Jewish leaders, got out on the streets and in their congregations and really proclaimed a message of hope and of nonviolence and peace. City officials did the same.
Yeah. So now the policemen have been charged with...
Yes, the 6 policemen have been charged in the death of Freddie Gray, who died while they were in his custody.
So what are the immediate steps that now need to be taken?
Well, we're so happy that those policemen were charged because this has been going on for many years, and that gave rise to a lot of the rage. Well over 100 incidents have been of police abuse have been recorded in the last couple of years of persons dying and being injured in police custody. That has given rise to rage. So what needs to be done is exactly what has started to happen in Baltimore now, accountability for brutality. I may mention one other thing. We know that black on black crime is a big problem in the communities. And we expect the police officers to protect us from the criminals. But when the officers are themselves the abusers, then that gives rise to rage. And we saw that on Monday.
And you've said, I think, and others have, that the wonder is that it didn't break out earlier.
Yes, we weren't surprised that that there was a conflagration on Monday. The biggest surprise in the black community was that it hadn't happened earlier. The city has paid out millions of dollars in abuse cases. But it's not just that. It is the cycle of hopelessness and poverty and violence that has been building up for years.
Well, let me ask you about that, because there are things that have to be done and will be done, I'm sure, right away. And the church can be involved in that. But down the road, the big things, it seems to me, that have to be done have to do with jobs and schools, primarily. So what can the church do to help that happen?
Well, the church has a moral voice that it can use, and saying to its members, we need to create jobs. You mentioned jobs, of course, and that lack of jobs gives rise to more poverty, ill housing, no good schools, and life expectancy. What a lot of people don't realize is that 15 Baltimore neighborhoods have life expectancies lower than that of North Korea. 8 neighborhoods in Baltimore have a lower life expectancy than Syria, and Syria is at war. We are talking about dire conditions, not all over the city, But the poverty in Baltimore, if those 8 neighborhoods were a nation, it would be one of the poorest nations in the world. And what the church can do about that is help partner with the private sector and with government to say, what can we do to create jobs, have better schools? It's going to take all of us. It's not just the church's duty. It's not just the government's duty or the private sector. It's all of us working together, and we've started to do that in Baltimore.
And very quickly, you had an occasion after a meeting this past week when you and everybody in the church went out in the streets.
Oh yes, it's the church should never lose its voice, and I really mean that literally. Just last night, I was with a church group. It was one of our wealthiest churches in Baltimore, predominantly white church, but they were in downtown, and some of those stores were looted. After the prayer service for Baltimore, we literally walked the streets, singing, bearing the cross. And many people in the community, the homeless, drivers, they were honking their horns, and they were clapping for us and taking pictures, and they were basically saying, thank you for being out here. You give us hope, and we know that you are with us. Imagine a congregation of mostly white folk singing for Freddie Gray, who died. That's the kind of thing that the church needs to do, bring people together.
Many thanks, Eugene Sutton, the Episcopal Bishop of Maryland.
Thank you.